Thank you so much, everyone. You've seen my face already quite a few times, but today I get to be the moderator of this panel. We are discussing token economies and how they relate to drug development. And now each one of my panel guests has either launched a token, their job has something to do with tokens, or they are looking to launch a token. So I think maybe the first thing we can start with is we'll do a round of intros. And I also just kind of want to discuss, like, where do tokens fit into your sphere of life and work? So yeah, maybe we'll start at the end with Brian.
So I'm Brian from VitaForge, and we are creating a platform for de-risking late-stage preclinical longevity assets and getting them through early clinical stages, phase 1, phase 2. So trying to build platforms and strategies to capitalize those early stages and get more assets into later stages of clinical development.
Amazing, Brian.
Okay, I'm the other Brian, 50% Brian, but importantly with an I, so it was the correct way. No offense to anybody with a Y out there. So Brian Majerski, I'm a founder of Cerebrum DAO. So we're a global network organization that crowdfunds solutions for brain diseases. Our ambition and goal is to end all brain diseases and have a world with only healthy brains. We look at brain disease as a function of aging. So we're also, I guess, to be considered a longevity DAO, because if you don't have your brain health, you really don't have anything.
Hi, my name is Jackie. I come from Diabetes DAO, and we fall in the camp of we're about to launch our token, and we'll hopefully be as successful as the amazing Cerebrum DAO. So yeah, we are focusing on accelerating diabetes research to a point where we can hopefully get to a cure. So much money is spent yearly. I think just on T1D alone, 500 million US was spent last year on funding scientific research around T1D. And yet we're still not at a cure yet. So anything that we can do to help is obviously needed. I come from an academic background. And so what brought me to DSci and this role, I guess, was, I guess, how fed up I was with the current academic system and the issues that I was facing every day. And I'm really excited about the DSci movement. Hopefully we can touch on that a little bit in this chat, what it can do for trad science.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I think I already made my intro. I'm from BNB Chain, the Ecosystem Business Development Manager. Yeah.
Amazing, thank you. So I think in the world, we kind of have a sort of spectrum of people, mainly sort of the crypto people who believe that everything will be tokenized and, token economies are the future. And we're on, an inevitable march that way. And then you have, the entirely other spectrum, which is often a lot of scientists that I meet that go sort of, why would you add tokens to a really complex system? What value do they bring me? So I think I'd love to hear from Brian and Jackie. You guys are looking at launching a token and you've decided to go the token pathway. What was it? What sort of issue were you coming across that made you reach out to tokens of all things?
So I think tokens offer an opportunity to scale capital to the specific de-risking steps in clinical development. And that can avoid this problem that happens in biotech, where you may IPO and bring in $160 million and deploy 20 million of that in a phase 1A. But if you have an adverse event, that remaining capital becomes trapped in your public vehicle. People don't want to make further investment into your entity. And because of that, that capital tends to just kind of cycle around stuck in your biotech corporation. And because of that, basically we just wait until you start trading below net asset value and wait for somebody to come along and scavenge you and collect the premium. And so if we can design tokenized models that will allow us to fund specific stages of clinical development, that can help investors to de-risk their investment, but also create an opportunity to bring more things out of preclinical stage and into that critically de-risked phase 1 trial, so that we can start to identify more potential candidates that can actually come to provide therapeutic benefit in the clinic.
Yeah, mine's a little bit more upstream of that, but that's a really good point. So the quick story for Cerebrum, like why did I even decide to start it? Was many people have heard this before, but my youngest of 3 kids, daughters, has Down syndrome. She's also a type 1 diabetic too, so I really understand that field too. unfortunately. But so what I understood when she was born is people with Down syndrome have almost a guarantee of early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, and they'll start developing the pathology in a pretty bad way in their early 30s, and they're not making it past their 60s. And so about 8 years into her life, I took stock of where we were with Alzheimer's, like what were the prospects of her having a therapeutic before she was 30. And I looked at the last 8 years and really not much had happened. And it was just very frustrating. And so I started asking the question, why? And looked at it from Charlie Munger's perspective of, if you show me the incentive, I'll tell you the outcome. And I looked at all the incentives, and what you had was, despite 10xing of funding from the NIH to $3 billion for Alzheimer's, really not much had happened. And you looked at the bureaucratic institutions that had built up over decades that understood how to get that honeypot of money and what they were incentivized to do, which was publish and then move on. And you just had, as Sebastian said earlier, you have a very few number of people who all have credibility and imprimatur that are all making these decisions, and not enough is being done without enough urgency. And then I also looked at, well, how can I have an effect on this? And you can say, well, let's go do a foundation and raise some philanthropic money. Well, that's been done. It's been done many times, and they're sitting on billions of dollars too, and they're funding into the same mindset and structure with the same bureaucratic infrastructure. And so then you step back and you look at, well, what's going on? We have an aging population, and you have a neurodegeneration crisis upon us. It's a global problem that's affecting hundreds of millions of people. And so I looked at it and said, well, I'm really interested in crypto and I'm participating in that. What are these things good for? Well, they're really good for coordinating talent and capital on a global scale. And so the thesis was, well, what if we reached out and said, let's make this the world's problem. Let's empower everybody to fund into a problem that we all care about, which is keeping our brains healthy and avoiding Alzheimer's disease. We can pool money, we can pool talent, we can pool capital, and we can give people participation rights that they don't have even with philanthropic donations, because they get the annual report. And then now these tokens can be used in a variety of different ways. They could be used not only for funding vehicles, but they could be used as rewards, incentives, and coordination mechanisms. And so we could build this whole flywheel that is powered by the people that really want to see these diseases solved. And so for me, it was more on the early end of this, and it said how we can, this is the way to disrupt getting things done. And our thesis with brain health is, I want more shots on goal and a broader diversity of hypotheses. That's what was lacking. Well, now we're already seeing that we're making a dent in that with Cerebrum, and it's a very early innings. And that's tokenization. That's what it can do for you.
Amazing, a glowing review. Jackie.
Yeah, really great points. Actually touched on everything I wanted to say, but yeah, just to add to that, I really see the power of tokenization in bringing the power back to the community that the research will ultimately benefit. And as you touched on, these philanthropic organizations and charities, they're amazing. They're actually what funded my research back in the day. But as a funder of those, we often don't get to see where exactly your money goes into this big fund, but you almost certainly don't get a say in it either. And so that's what really excites me the most. And I think it's just a way to mobilize a community that just hasn't really been engaged in this way before.
Amazing, amazing. So I think also what's really interesting is you three over here are all looking at launching your own token, but Diana, you come from a bit of a different side, coming from BNB. And the name of this panel is Token Economies, and it's one thing to launch a token and have your own token, but to sort of create these entirely novel financial systems where there really is a complete flow of tokens. What do you think is going to be necessary to create this sort of proper biotech economy with tokens?
Well, first of all, tokenomics is very important, as they have mentioned. But the second thing is science experiments can be successful or it can be unsuccessful. And then what if the result is unsuccessful, but this is maybe not yet the final result? So how do you convince your investors, the communities, that you're not leaving, like you will still building, but you need more fund? How can you let them to still support you financially, to still hold the token? This is one thing. The second thing is, even though we can see many very serious founders that building very hard related science to try to solve the problem, to try to solve the disease, find a treatment. But there are scammers, right? They pretend
100%.
like they are going to do the same or similar things, but their goal is just to launch a token and dump and go. So how can you convince your communities that you are not them, because fakers can fake pretty well? So I think this is a very important thing to solve at the same time, so we don't ruin the confidence of the community, and the DeSci can really go to the day that we would want to see the how prosperous it is.
Amazing, thank you. I think you touched on a super interesting sort of rub that we have in the DeSci community, which is, you know, to do science, to do serious, real science, there's no way we can put that entirely on chain. We still have to interface with manufacturers, the FDA, sort of your patients, most of which who are likely not on chain if you actually look at the statistics of how much of the world operates and uses Web3. So in sort of, you know, DeFi, it is possible to operate with just an entirely Web3 native audience. DeSci, not so much. So we have this continual rub of the crypto feeling quite daunting for a lot of traditional partners. I would love to know from you three is how are you interfacing with the traditional drug development and bringing in your tokens to that? Maybe Brian, you can start. Yeah, because
Sure. Yeah, I don't really see that as an issue so much. If you look at the model, like one of the models we've looked at with the DAOs is to look at rare disease communities, and it's a very similar thing that they've done. They just did it without tokens, which is you've got a small community of people with one specific problem, and they just pulled together and funded a lot of research and ultimately led to developing therapeutic drugs. And it was a space that would have been ignored otherwise had they not pulled together and done the research. So for us, the way we're looking at it is we're funding a lot of the early stage preclinical work in using tokens and engaging our community. At some point, that IP is ready for, you know, clinical and development, and we see multiple pathways that can interface properly. We can spin that IP out into its own company and go and raise venture capital into it, and then go through the traditional process there, where the token holders just decide we're gonna move the IP into a legal entity. Or you can just out-license it, and at that point, yes, you are negotiating with a biotech or a pharma to, you know, either acquire it or have some kind of a royalty agreement, but it's a legal structure. There's going to be a process by which the token holders can vote to move the IP into a proper wrapper that can then be commercialized. So I think there's going to be an interface. Like if there is a promising therapeutic that's got the data behind it, that's got the people behind it, we will find a way legally to make it happen.
yeah, it's a nice point. Sort of if it's there, people will end up coming to it. Jackie, I would love to know sort of when you, so Jackie's recently left her job as a scientist and come to DeSci, which is a very proud moment for me. Jackie originally did a DeSci course that I ran. So it was nice to see sort of the full vision of that from scientist to coming to DeSci. So thank you very much, Jackie.
You red-pilled me.
I did indeed. But sort of when you were explaining to people like your next career move, obviously speaking to your colleagues and that sort of thing, what was the aha moment for them when you were explaining what your next step is?
Yeah, so I definitely didn't lead with, oh, crypto, Web3, because that does obviously scare a lot of people that aren't in the space. I think you forget that you are in somewhat of a bubble. And so I positioned it as, hey, look, there's this movement, like speaking to DeSci in particular, there's this movement that, in my opinion, finally addresses all the issues that we're facing when we're talking about, you know, the funding crisis in science, the reproducibility crisis, and the publishing issue. All these issues, like we've been trying, us as academics have spoken and moaned about it for years, but we aren't any closer necessarily to, we haven't been any closer to a solution. And so when I lead with that, like, hey, I've found out about this infrastructure that can actually address this, and you reel them in that way, and then you say, look, it's using blockchain technology. When you actually break it down, the concepts aren't that difficult, as you were able to do so well in the molecule course that I took earlier this year. It actually isn't as complicated as it needs to be. I think what we can do collectively as people in Web3 is maybe not overcomplicate things, and let's try and simplify it. That's how we're actually going to be recruiting people to DeSci, but also just Web3 in general, right? So I do lead with, look, we've got a solution. It's using blockchain technology underneath it, and just kind of outline it as simply as possible without getting into the nitty gritty too soon. Like I try to avoid token talk early, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Wean them in slowly.
Yes, we kind of have a thing going on in the office, which is basically we've got like a token swear jar that every time you mention the word token, you have to put into the swear jar. Amazing.
So I got a little story on this. It was
Yeah.
funny because we were talking with one of the tech transfer offices, and the second we sat down, they saw DAO, and they're like, we're going to be talking about tokens. And I'm like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, well, can you explain this? And I explained what an IP NFT was. And the guy was like, oh my God, that is the first time I've heard a use case for a token that made any sense to me. He's like, all right, now let's talk.
Yes.
And so if you
Amazing.
explain it in simple terms, it works.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's also one of the big comments I've sort of gotten repeatedly about DeSci, which is that a lot of people feel like, okay, cool, we've heard about blockchain technology, and like, here's a really cool use case where this infrastructure can be applied and really make real world progress. I would love to know, coming from a more crypto background, would you say this is a common sentiment?
That always launch a token.
No, that it's sort of DeSci has a really good use case for blockchain technology, and it could sort of be a flagship for when you're trying to, push the blockchain cause, when you can say, well, hey, look, real science is getting funded, progress is happening, and this is entirely because of these on-chain communities.
Well, I would say DeSci definitely has a reason why it has to go on chain, because we can. Well, as a design user, you don't really need to think you are using blockchain. You can just think that this is a new app. It's like Kickstarter. Like I have a project, I use Kickstarter. And then you don't really need to understand the blockchain technology until you try to figure out why this is fair, like why I can trust the token. And then I think from all of the users that new to Web3, come to Web3, they don't really need to start from the technology of blockchain, Web3, crypto, token. They can just try to use the app, like a normal app that they want to use to solve their daily problems. And then when it comes to the point that they wonder why I can trust it, and then they can start to understand the technology behind. And I think from cycles of crypto, we've seen lots of narratives that come and go, and then they come again to the next narrative, to the next cycle. But I don't think that's a really bad thing. So there are, of course, people trying to get money during the cycles with these narratives. However, some concept comes out, but then it guns because the infrastructure is not ready. However, I think with the AI agent right now, it's not only a token that being launched, but AI agent with the 402 features that the agent can interact with agent even on chain. I think there's lots of things that can be done in reality, not only as a concept. So I'm very looking forward to see the future with design, like with AI.
Yes, Brian.
You mentioned the cyclicality in the crypto space, and that's something that in late stage biotech development that you deal with. So we deal with the credit cycle, and it makes it very difficult to advance assets. And I think that is an opportunity for tokenization to really fulfill a need in creating more efficient markets where you can deploy capital in a scaled way, and you can de-risk assets in a stepwise function rather than inefficiently deploying capital and being unable to advance the same number of assets, and we get capital trapped in the wrong places. And so if we can start to break away from that cyclicality, and I think this is really critical, particularly as you look at the digital asset treasury space with these ideas of digital credit. We have these high yield products now, and this can start to break that cyclicality. But if we don't de-risk our business models, then it's going to be very hard to attract capital away from a 10%, 12% return. In biotech, we can provide that high alpha potential for a high return. But we also have to demonstrate that we can start to reduce the risk associated with our development process and tokenization is one of the most promising pathways towards that.
Amazing. Okay, cool. We are having to wrap up. Just before we finish, Brian, I would love you to tell us a little bit about your project that you're launching soon.
So at Vita Forge, we're developing a digital asset treasury strategy for public vehicles that will enable them to harness the volatility of early clinical stage biotech development through convertible note capture and arbitraging fiat currencies as a strategy for, you have to deploy the money associated with your clinical trials, but we think that the interest and the price uncertainty that you inject into your equity will provide an opportunity to do capital fundraising over long-term convertible notes and actually generate yield on just the actions of being a highly uncertain business model. And so that we can de-risk overall the model of early clinical development.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Thank you so much to all of my panelists. You were great. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you. We're done.
Thank you.